Good morning. My name is Kyle Gatlin. I'm pastor at Covenant, and we're thrilled that you've chosen to tune in today if you're watching, however, whenever you're watching, and really thrilled that those of you decided to show up and sit in person today. Wonderful day to be outside, right? Yeah. So I'm fine. I need rain. All right, so I need rain a little bit at my place, so I'm good to go with it. Years ago, a guy named Jim Collins wrote a book called Built to Last. Built to Last, and obviously he's talking about companies, and that he went on to another book called Good to Great, which I've read and actually used many years ago for a sermon series, at least the title. But in Built to Last, Jim came up with an acronym that is still sort of around. People have still use it today. BHAG, B-H-A-G, BHAG, Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. And the point was, I'm summarizing a whole lot here. The idea was that the companies that had the BHAGs were built to last. And if you think back in our own history, United States, one of the BHAGs that we had as a country came from John F. Kennedy. I was not alive then. Most of you were not, probably. Some of you might have been alive when he came on and said to the United States, "We are going to the moon. We are going to the moon." That's a big, hairy, audacious goal. And the thing about having a BHAG is it's simple, it's clear, it's defined, and it really can energize the team. Whatever you're trying to accomplish, it can energize the team because it's a focal point. It's something very clear. You know the end result when you get there. And obviously, with us, when we went to the moon, that was clear. We had made our goal. Years ago, when we decided we were going to build this building, that was a big, hairy, audacious goal, to build this. Everybody bought in. Everybody knew the end result. You could see it. And when you walked in Easter of 2009, it was there, clearly defined, and people got behind it. Well, I really don't want to talk any more about BHAGs, but what I do want to talk about today is BHAP. Big, hairy, audacious prayers. Big, hairy, audacious prayers. And the prayer that I'm talking about is a little bit different. But see, a lot of us are accustomed to praying, God, just help me make it safe on this trip, right? We're going on a 12-hour trip, a 15-hour trip. Just help me be safe on this trip. We're accustomed to those type of prayers. We're accustomed to, God, help me remember what I studied when I take this test. We're accustomed to that. Or if you're my age or a little bit older, God, just help me make it to the next rest area. Please let me make it to the next rest area. So, yes, I've prayed all of those. I've prayed nothing against those because I've prayed them all. And there's probably other stuff that we've prayed for, God, help this person to leave so I can park close to Walmart store, Light turn red, light turn green, whatever. We've prayed some of those prayers before, but that's not the kind of prayer I'm looking at. The kind of prayer I'm looking at today is that big, hairy, audacious prayer. This is a prayer that when you pray it, there's only one way that prayer will be answered, and that's if God is in it and if God does it. That's that big, hairy, audacious prayer. Because when you pray it, this is something I can't do, God. This is all going to be on you, my man. This is all on you. And if you're in it, and it's your will, then it will happen. And that's the only way that that prayer will be answered, if God does something in it. So today, before we get into that BHAP, we're actually going to look at what life looks like without God, what life looks at with God, and then we're going to look at the big, hairy, audacious prayer. And all of this is found in the book of Joshua. Actually, chapters 9 and 10 of Joshua. Yeah, I know the book is a little bit longer, but we're closing out today with this one. You have to read the rest of the book on your own. But this is where we're going to land and finish out the series. Have you ever done something in your life that felt good in the moment, that felt right in the moment, but then when you had made that decision and then had to live with it, you went, uh-oh, that was not right. That was not right. Please do not look at your spouse at this time. All right? You ever been there? Yeah, you ever been there? Joshua was. Joshua was right there because he found out that there are consequences of not going to God. There are consequences of not going to God. I want to refresh Joshua here real quickly. Joshua has led the nation of Israel into the promised land, and their first thing that they had done in the promised land was capture Jericho. The walls came down in Jericho. We had a little misstep. Somebody took some stuff that was that they weren't supposed to take, so they lost their next battle in the place of Ai. Then they rectified that situation and they destroyed the things that were taken from Jericho. Then they retook Ai, wiped them out. So they were getting ready to check off the next thing on the list. The word had gotten around, don't mess with these Israelites. They're tough stuff. They have an unstoppable offense. They are juggernauts. They're playing Georgia this week. No, wait a second. I got messed up with my teams here. All right. So this is Israelites. Nobody's beating them. People are scared of them. And a people called the Gibeonites had heard about this. The Gibeonites, I believe the Israelites were actually staying in a place called Gilgal, still there. That's where they went off from there to attack Jericho and Ai. I think they're still staying around Gilgal. About a day's journey is where the Gibeonites lived. And the Gibeonites had already heard the stories, they knew they were in trouble. And so they figured out a way to cheat the system. Because the system was, Israelite was taking over Canaan, the promised land. Israel, that was going to be their land, and nobody but Israelites were supposed to be in this land, according to God's plan and God's promise. And so the Gibeonites figured out this. We're going to pretend. And what they did is they dressed up in old, worn-out clothes. They brought old wineskins that probably were leaking, and they brought moldy bread and some other goods that looked like they had been traveling a long time. That was the appearance that they wanted to put forth. And so the Gibeonites do show up to Joshua, and it appears from all indications that they had come from a long way away. That they had journeyed long, because in this long journey, the food had gotten spoiled, the wineskins had gotten cracked from the sun and exposure and all the traveling they'd done. Their clothes were worn out because they had so long had left from home. So that's what it appeared. And so we read this in Joshua chapter 9, verse 14. The Israelites sampled their provisions. In other words, they were trying to make firm what they had said. Okay, you said you came a long way away. Let's examine what you brought with you. And it looked all the world like they did indeed travel a long distance, because the bread was moldy and the food was not looking good, like it had been, days, weeks, whatever the case was. So they figured out that their story was accurate based on looking at their provisions. But notice that next phrase, but did not inquire of the Lord. They didn't go to God with this conundrum, all right? Then Joshua made a treaty of peace with them, with the Gibeonites, to let them live. Now, the rule that's going into Canaan and the Promised Land, that God says, this is your land and nobody else's. Only people who follow after me will live. Rahab was one of those. She believed in God, and she was able to live outside of Jericho. When Jericho, everybody left, was gone to Jericho, but Rahab and her family lived because she believed in God. She put her faith in God. Joshua made a treaty of peace that let them live, but they weren't supposed to. The Gibeonites were not supposed to live. That was not in the long-range plan. The leaders of the assembly ratified this treaty. So Joshua's leaders said, good deal for us too. We'll have a peace treaty with them. So you understand this, right? This was a decision based on feeling. They left God out of it. They did not inquire of the Lord. They had based this strictly on feelings, which means the treaty means that we're not going to harm you. We can coexist in this big land together. And of course, they were thinking they were way away, so there wasn't really going to be a big deal at the time. Made a peace treaty. We act like this a lot of times, don't we? We make decisions on a whim. We make decisions based on a gut feeling. It looks good, it sounds good, and then we make a quick decision, and God is not part of the equation at all. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes it works out. Sometimes no harm, no foul, but sometimes when God's not in it, things don't work out the way that we think they should. You've heard the phrase before, I know you have, anything worth doing is worth doing well. Well, I want you to learn another phrase today. Anything worth doing is worth having God in it. Anything worth doing is worth having God in it. I believe, this is a general statement, I understand that, but I really believe that we underestimate just how relational God wants to be with us. And let me give you an example of what I mean by God being in relationship with us. Those of us who are married, those of us who are in long-term relationships with people, we know that our spouse wants to be in relation with us and wants to make decisions together for the most part. And in a perfect world, that happens. In a perfect world, that happens, where both parties are in agreement on whatever decision is being made. Both parties have input. Both are interested. Both want to have their feelings and ideas heard before going through and making the decision. And in a perfect world and in the relationships that work, both parties inquire of the other person. Hey, do you think this is a good idea if I do this? What if we do this? Do you think that this will work for us as a couple, as a family? We're in that relationship, we're invested. And we want the other person's input. We want their opinions. We want their ideas before we go forward as a couple or as a family in making decisions. God has that same desire with us. He wants to be involved in our daily decisions. He wants to be involved in things in our lives. He wants us to come to Him. But yet, so many times, we just leave God out of it. We leave Him out. And I think Paul sort of gives us the reason sometimes why we push God to the side. We don't want God in our lives at all. It has to do with Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. Evil's out there deceiving us into thinking we can do it on our own. We don't need any help. We are fine. And when Satan comes and enters that, it distracts us and gets us away from going to God during this time. And see, when we're not we're not ready for this, we make bad choices. When we're not aware that evil is out there disguising itself to distract us from God, we make bad choices. So how do we go from making bad choices to making good choices? We go to God with everything. We go to God with everything. I'm not talking about an extremist view of this, all right? So let me give you an example of extremist view. I've met a couple people like this in my lifetime. They've been in my churches before, where they don't take a step without asking God which way to go. All right, God, I need to take a step. Where do I go? I got 8 choices. I can go north. I can go south. I can go east. I can go west. I can go northeast. I can go northwest. I can go southeast. I can go southwest. Which way, God? Tell me. I'm not moving till you tell me. You ever met people like that? Well, here's the problem. If we all did that, we'd be here a long time before we left today, right? Okay, God, okay, that's one step. What's next? East, west, north? I'm not talking about those extreme views. I'm not talking about that. But I am talking about, how about beginning your day with this? God, who out there today needs a phone call? Who out there needs a text message from me? Who do I need to go by and see? God, in my job today, who I just need to stop by and encourage? God, in my visits today, what do I need to say? At what point do I need to listen? It's not that difficult to just say, God, I need you to be a part of my day today. It's not that difficult. The Gibeonites, I want you to understand this. The Gibeonites had made this treaty that angered a group of Amorites. I think there was 5 kings of Amorite in the Amorite country. And these 5 kings heard of this treaty. And they were mad. So they were going to attack the Gibeonites. And so what we find here is, okay, there's a treaty between Israel and Gibeonites, but does that treaty extend to protecting them from other people? And it appears that Joshua must have said, God, okay, we have an agreement not to kill the Gibeonites, but technically did that agreement extend to protecting them? And we find this, the Lord said to Joshua, do not be afraid of them, the Amorites. I have given them into your hand. Not one of them will be able to withstand you. So he inquired this time. He inquired what they are to do. When was the last time you actually went to God and were really passionate about what you were going to God about? Let me give you an example. David says this in Psalm 27. My heart says of you, seek his face. Lord, your face, O Lord, I will seek. Do not hide your face from me. Do not turn your servant away in anger. You have been my helper. Do not reject me or forsake me, God, my Savior. David is praying this. David is praying this. And why are we hesitant to go to God with our lives? David's pouring himself out. David's opening himself up. Why are we hesitant to go to God with our lives? Maybe we don't think he wants to be bothered. Maybe we think that he don't want to be involved in everything, right? He's God. Does he want to be involved in everything of my life? Sometimes we just don't think about it. I think if I had to make a general statement again for most of us in here, we go about our lives, sometimes it's just the last thing on our mind. We just don't think about it. We don't think as we're driving down the road, we're thinking of what we got to do for the day, what's going on for the day, and we don't think about, Where's God in this? We don't think about it. I think that encapsulates many of us. But how about this? Why are we hesitant to go to God with everything? Maybe we just don't trust him. Maybe we just don't trust him. Or maybe we just simply trust ourselves more. Maybe that's it. David says this a few verses down the road. I remain confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord. David is a man who's had more downs than he has ups. So his life has literally been a roller coaster. But he is confident of this. He is assured of the character of God. And he knows that God will hear him. When he goes to God, he is confident and knows that God is listening and that God is with him. He's confident of this. I love what the writer of Isaiah, when Isaiah said this, whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, this is the way. Walk in it. I'm still waiting for the Mandalorian to finish that when he says, this is the way. I'm waiting for him to say, walk in it. But maybe that'll be the next season. They'll say that. There is an urgency, right? In these words, there's a desire for something. Whether you turn to the right, you will hear, this is the way. I want you to hear the context of this in Isaiah. The Lord longs to be gracious to you, therefore he will rise up to show you compassion. For the Lord is a God of justice. Blessed are all who wait for him. People of Zion who live in Jerusalem, you will weep no more. How gracious he will be when you cry for help. As soon as he hears, he will answer you. So right over Isaiah is understanding, he's setting this up for us to hear. This is the way, walk in it. He's setting it up saying, listen, this is not just about God hearing your pleas. It's about you being in relationship with God, acknowledging him as Lord. So what's stopping us from looking to God for great things? What is stopping us from looking to God for great things? And I think the reason that many of us don't look to God for great things is because we don't believe in a great God. Maybe we believe in a God with a little g. But Joshua knew he had a big God. How did he know this? Because God had proven to him over and over again. What had Joshua lived through? Joshua lived through the 10 plagues in Egypt. He had lived through the Exodus out of Egypt. Joshua had then watched the Red Sea part and all of Israel cross the Red Sea. And for 40 years, Joshua had seen God provide manna daily for the people to eat and survive. And then on a couple of occasions, he had seen water literally come out of a rock. Then he saw the swollen Jordan River dam up and stop flowing so they could walk across. Then he saw the walls of Jericho fall down when he only did a shout. So Joshua had seen this. And so it came time for the next battle. This battle to protect the Gibeonites. These Amorites were attacking the Gibeonites. Israel attacked the Gibeonites, and get this, Israel obviously was winning. But Joshua saw that, it was going to take a little bit longer to defeat these guys than I originally thought, and I really want to go ahead and do it today. I don't want to have to pay these guys overtime, okay? Don't want to pay these guys overtime. Time and a half, it's a killer to my budget. So here's what he prays. On the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, Son, S-U-N, stand still over Gibeon, and you, moon, over the valley of Ajalon. So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, till the nation avenged itself on its enemies, as it is written in the book of Jashar. Jashar is a Hebrew history book, basically, that puts this story in there. And so when people are reading this later, they can go back and verify this story. All right? The sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day. There has never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord listened to a human being. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. Big, hairy, audacious prayer. God, I know you really don't want these Gibeonites to actually be living, but we're stuck with that. And these dudes are attacking them. And God, I really want to wipe them out today. I don't want to have to go into the night or tomorrow. Can you just stop the earth from rotating? That's a big prayer. And God does it. God literally pauses time for Joshua. And I hope you realize the extent of what just happened. God stopped the earth from rotating on its axis, all to save these Gibeonites who were liars, deceivers, so they could live. What do you think God wants to do for you? What do you think God is wanting to do in the battles of your life? If he will do that for the Gibeons, my gosh, what will he do for us? Because many of you are in battles right now. You are in some tough battles. Some of you are in relationship battles right now. Some of you are in battles with treatments and diagnosis. Some of you are in battles of what to do with your life. Are you praying big, hairy, audacious prayers in those situations? Because God says, I want to be in it. Come to me. I stopped the earth rotating for idiots. People that should be dead, I stopped the earth rotating for. What do you think I'll do for you? John Wesley, who was sort of the founder of Methodism and the Wesleyan sort of tradition of about 80 different denominations, truthfully, was crossing the Atlantic. And he was in a boat. There was a guy named Adam Clark on this boat with him. Storm came up, winds were coming up. It was throwing the boat off course from wherever they were heading. Adam came down and told John. He said, look, hey, we got a lot of wind, waves, and we're being blown off course. And so Adam heard what John Wesley did after that, and he heard this prayer, which I'm putting in today's language, so I'm not giving you the withers and thous and therefores and all that stuff, all right? I'm not reading this in King James language, all right? I'm reading it in Kyle Gatlin language. Almighty and everlasting God, you hold sway everywhere, and all the things serve the purpose of your will. You hold the wind in your fist and sit upon the water floods and reign as king forever. Command these winds and these waves to obey you, and take us speedily and safely to the haven we are going. He finished his prayer, got up, and started reading his book again. Adam Clark went up to the deck, was calm. No more wind, the ship was on course. And when he came back down, he wrote this about John Wesley. So fully did he expect to be heard that he took it for granted that he was heard. Can we pray like that? Have we ever prayed like that? Let me be honest with you. I'm not going to go into a lot of details because you can look this up, but there are issues now in the Methodist Church. And the issues are such that a new expression of Methodism, a new denomination in Methodism has started. And it's not going anywhere. And so what you're going to see in the coming months, truthfully, you're going to see people who have been in a church all of their life sadly leave their church. And you're going to see people who grew up in their whole lifelong in a church gladly leaving their church. You're going to see new congregations starting in both of these new expressions, or both expressions of Methodism. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to share with you my big, hairy, audacious prayer. God, may the churches combined in the next year introduce more people to Jesus than the one did 5 years prior. That's my big, hairy, audacious prayer. Are you ready to make a big, hairy, audacious prayer? Are you willing to do that? Trey's going to come out and sing a song and to remind us, give us some time to think about this. And as Trey comes out, I want to encourage you to pray a big, hairy, audacious prayer. And I'd love for you to share that at least with me. There's cards laying right down here on the end of the kneeling rails where you can write them and then just hand them to me, drop them in the offering bucket or something like that. I will get them. So that the kneeling rail will be open for you to pray. To pray a big, hairy, audacious prayer. A prayer that only God can answer. Only God can stop the earth from rotating on its axis. What kind of prayer are you praying? Why do I believe that you can pray this prayer? Because Jesus says, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. If you believe, you'll receive whatever you ask for in prayer. And then I love what the Hebrews writer says, let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. Do you have a PHAP? Do you have a BHAP? A big, hairy, audacious prayer? I invite you to pray it. And if you're willing, to share it with us so that we can pray with you. I'm going to ask you to just remain seated and contemplate, pray wherever as Trey leads us with this final song.